Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are or when you're watching this session. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're enjoying Microsoft Ignite. In today's session, we're going to be talking about where does an organisation begin using Azure. Now, my name is Sarah Lean. I'm a Senior Cloud Advocate here at Microsoft. I am based in Scotland, as you may be able to tell from the accent. I am loving the fact that we're still being able to connect with everybody virtually at these events, but I'm definitely missing those in-person events. So please do connect to me on Twitter and reach out and keep the conversation going. I love meeting new people and connecting with new people. Now, in today's session, we're going to be talking about Microsoft Azure and introducing you to that if you're not familiar with it. We're going to be talking about some of the challenges that organisations have if they're looking to adopt the cloud into their IT strategy. We're also going to be talking about the cloud adoption framework and how it can help you with those cloud adoption challenges. And lastly, I'll be sharing some learning resources to help you understand Azure a bit more and also learn more about the cloud adoption framework. Now, I have a team of my colleagues, wonderful colleagues who have stayed up late and are able to answer some questions. So please do take advantage of that Q&A box that you have within this session. I'll also hope to answer some questions at the end of this session myself, but please do interact with us. We're happy to take any of the questions that you have. Now, in terms of where we are in the current world, we're talking about this fourth industrial revolution. And what that really means is that at present, lots of organisations are using technology to try and make their business proficiencies much easier and much better. We're introducing things like artificial intelligence to make processes quicker and more efficient. Organisations are also looking at how they can maybe leverage technology to help us work better and smarter in terms of where we want to work. So remote working is obviously a big thing right now. So organisations are looking to technology to try and help it make employees be able to work where they want to and with whatever devices that they want to. Now, one of the things that organisations are using in order to try and make themselves more proficient and more reliable and more efficient is cloud computing. Now, if you're not familiar with what cloud computing is, simply put, it is the delivery of computing services like servers and network and storage, artificial intelligence, analytics, all of that good stuff over the internet. Now, with cloud computing, there are a bunch of benefits that come with it. And I think one of the analogies that I like to tell, and something that we can all relate to, is that we've all experienced a sale of our favourite store where their online retail site has crashed due to the traffic going towards that website, and we've all missed out on our sale and our favourite item at a cheap price. And organisations are obviously frustrated when that happens because they have missed out on that sale and they get a bad reputation from their customers because you haven't been able to get onto that website. And that's been a challenge for a lot of organisations to have the computing power behind the website in order to actually deliver the functionality that is needed for that sale or that one-off event that they're hosting. Because of the investment and the physical space that you needed previously to have all of that computing power in their own on-prem data centre. However, with the cloud, it's really easy to scale up and scale down when you have those needs. You can often log into a portal and just move a little slider bar or adjust something, and then you suddenly have the scalability, the extra compute power in order to serve all of that online traffic. And once your sale event is over, you can move that slider back down and then you don't have to use that computing power. So you're really only paying for what you need. And that's one of the great benefits of cloud computing to a lot of organisations, especially the retail sector. That scalability, that elasticity that enables them to account for certain factors within their organisation. Now, when we talk about cloud, you'll hear terms such as public cloud. Now, public cloud is owned and operated by a third party. You've got private, which is owned by an individual organisation, and that could be someone's on-prem data centre, potentially sitting in, the basement of their office block where all of their staff work, and that serves all their computing needs. But you also hear the term hybrid. Now, hybrid is a combination of that public and that private cloud provider service. And that's taking advantage of both the benefits of public and both the benefits of private cloud as well. Now, when we talk about public, you should hopefully be familiar with Microsoft Azure. Microsoft Azure is a public cloud, and we have that all across the world. There are over 60 regions. I actually think this slide is a little out of date. I think someone earlier at Ignite said that we have over 65 Azure regions spread across the globe, but each blue dot on this map represents where an Azure region or an Azure data center resides. And what this scalability and this geographic cover gives you is the ability to put your computing services wherever your end users are, wherever your customers are in the world. And you can see there's a lot of blue dots on that map. Now, inside all of these Azure data centers or Azure regions is a bunch of services. And as this slide builds out, you'll see that there are a whole host of services within Azure. I don't even think this slide deck actually covers everything that we have in Azure. I think last time I spoke to someone about it, we said that there's well over 200 different Azure services. Now, this gives you great capability and great flexibility to deliver the services that you need, how you need them, but it can also be a bit overwhelming for some people. But this is where every customer and every organization's journey starts to become very unique. When they are starting to adopt the cloud, they're starting to do it for various different reasons. Everybody's reason will be different, and hence everybody's journey will be different as well. Now, no matter what organisation you work for, what industry you work for, the size of your organisation, or the business motivations for adopting cloud, there are some common starting points that you may have to think about on your journey. Now, some of those include such as articulating your vision or defining why you're actually wanting to look at cloud adoption, trying to find out the reasons behind it. Now, as a technologist, I always want to play with the latest and greatest tech, the shiny thing in the shop window. And that's sometimes not necessarily a great reason for the business adopting that technology. So you really have to think about why you're wanting to adopt the cloud and what business benefits it will have for your organisation and your business. You also have to think about your existing infrastructure. What do you have? How does it work if you wanted to move that into the cloud? Is it even relevant to move into the cloud? There's lots of challenges around adopting your existing infrastructure into the cloud, and you have to think clearly about which ones and which workloads fit well within the cloud. You also have to think about governance and security and how you operate in the cloud. Lots of organisations have regulatory compliance that they need to meet in order to, fulfil their needs within their industry. They have to think about security. How do you secure your environment when it's up in the cloud? You have to think very differently about how your workloads are secure when you move into the cloud. There's lots of common things that you have to think about when you start on your journey. What we found at Microsoft is that there's a common bunch of challenges that our customers find when they actually embark on cloud adoption. Now, these challenges are something that we have seen patterns across. Now, in terms of some of the challenges, I focused on 3 today that I want to show you how you can think about them, how you can overcome them, and what they actually mean to your organisation. Now, the first challenge that a lot of organisations meet is the business case. How do they convince the business to actually go forward with this cloud adoption? And it can often be really hard for businesses to justify it. They think about the tangible costs, the relevant costs, and it can be a complex process because there are a lot of myths around cloud adoption. And that's where you have to dispel them in order to actually try and win over your stakeholders, win over your CEO or win over your financial director to allow you to actually implement this cloud adoption. Now, the second challenge that we see a lot of organisations encounter is technical debt. Technical debt is when you haven't necessarily updated all of your applications or your service to the latest technology. We've probably all remiss of not making sure that everything's up to date or putting it at the back burner and not recognise it as an important step within our IT strategy. Now, technical debt doesn't necessarily need to just be the fact that you haven't kept your applications or your workloads up to date. It could also be that you've lost that knowledge about how all of that hangs together within your environment. You might have had staff who've left the job or changed job or retired, and all of that knowledge and how it all goes together has actually left with them. I'm sure I have worked in several places where we have had post-it notes over servers that said don't touch, because we don't know how it works and we don't know how it responds, if it's actually going to be rebooted or if we tweak something over it. So technical debt is something that a lot of organisations struggle with at the moment as well. And the last challenge that we often see people encountering is the skills challenge. Now, we're all busy, there's lots to do every day, and often the thing that gets left behind is personal development, looking forward and learning new things. I know I'm guilty of always dropping my personal development time, and a lot of organisations have adopted this mentality where personal development isn't something that they're investing in, and that kind of leads to the staff not adopting a good practice as well with personal development. And that means that these new technologies that cloud are introducing can often be quite challenging for organisations because their staff don't know how to work it. They don't know how to think about going forward, how to implement it and how to operate it. And that can be a massive challenge. That can be a massive challenge for them to try and adopt cloud, because if your staff don't know how to operate all of these workloads within the cloud, then trying to adopt it is going to be quite a difficult one for you. However, what we've recognised here at Microsoft is that there are a common pattern when people are adopting the cloud. And what we've actually put together is the Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. And what that helps you with is defining that business strategy case for you, giving you best practices and tools and guidance around how you can actually embark on your cloud adoption journey. Now, the Cloud Adoption Framework is a modular framework, and it isn't something that you necessarily have to start at the start and then end at the end. It isn't one of those processes that you work through end to end. You can dive in whenever you need it, whenever you as an organisation feel that you need some help or guidance. Now, the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework has been put together by Microsoft employees, customers, and our partners, taking all of those challenges that we've seen with other organisations and putting them into this framework so that other organisations can actually have a better time with their cloud adoption journey. Now, in terms of the stages of the Cloud Adoption Framework, there are several in it, and I want to talk you through how those align with some of the challenges that we've discussed earlier on. With the strategy stage, we're starting to document your motivation, starting to define why you're actually doing this cloud adoption. What are your business outcomes? What is your success measure? And when you start to document all of those and start to think about that process, this is where you actually start to build out your business case and make that more successful. So the strategy section has some great guidance about how to build that business case and how to get the okay from your stakeholders when you actually go forward with it. Now, the plan section is where you start to actually look at your existing infrastructure. Start to think about how all of that sits together. How does it all link? How does it all work? And what does it mean for your organisation? Which workloads are mission critical? Which workloads could actually be decommissioned and aren't actually being used anymore? And then you can start to really understand your technical debt, the depth of that technical debt, if you have any within your organisation. And it's at this stage that you can start, once you start to identify, you can start to plan how you're actually going to resolve it. One of the use cases is we have a lot of customers who are still using Windows Server 2008, but it's out of support. It's no longer a supported operating system. But we at Microsoft have guidance about how you can update that and go forward and bring it onto the latest and greatest Windows Server operating system. So often when you do find that technical debt within your environment, there can be a path out of it. You just have to know where that technical debt is in order to get yourself out of it. Now, the plan stage is also where you start to talk to your staff about that skilling issue. Are they up to date with how to work the cloud? Do they need some more support? Do you need to build in a training plan? Do you need to budget for that training? How are you going to adopt that training and keep them up to date with their skill set? Gone are the days where we send IT people on a course for a week, they sit the certification, and then they're compliant, or they know how to use the technology for the next 3 or 5 years until another bit of technology comes out. You have to constantly be learning with the cloud, and a lot of organisations are starting to adopt a learning day mentality where their staff gets maybe a day a month where they can dedicate themselves to actually learning something new and not have to deal with the business as usual activities within their organisation. But you have to think about this for your organisation and what's going to suit your organisation and your staff's needs going forward. Now, the ready section is probably one of my favourite sections actually within the cloud adoption framework. This is where you start to actually put into practice some of that plan and some of that strategy. You'll start to build out what we call a landing zone, which is the minimum viable product of things you need within the cloud in order to host your workload. But it's also the section of the cloud adoption framework where you start to get guidance around how to operate within the cloud. So how do you deal with Azure subscriptions? How many Azure subscriptions do you need? Naming convention. I'm a bit saddened to say that the naming convention isn't guiding us towards using our favourite TV characters or movie characters for server names like I used to, but it's giving you some real good guidance about what you should be thinking about in terms of naming conventions for your resources in the cloud. And it's also the section that starts to deal with cost management, how you track the costs within the cloud and how you budget going forward for the cloud as well. Now, my second favourite stage of the cloud adoption framework is adopt. And as a techie, this is a place where I get to start to play with the technology. I actually start to get to move the workloads into the cloud. I start to implement that and see them turning into production workloads and going forward with the cloud. So this is the doing bit, as I call it. The adopt stage is where you actually start to implement all of that technology. So hopefully, if you've done all your planning, all your strategizing, all your inventory correctly, this stage will be the fun stage where you actually see that all come into fruition for you. Now, the second or the two last stages within the cloud adoption framework are govern and manage. Now, often these are the stages where you'll constantly be reiterating on. These are the stages that really concentrate on how you actually operate within the cloud. Well, as I mentioned earlier, lots of organisations have regulatory compliance that they have to meet with their IT, whether that be where the data is stored or how they store things like customer data, and they have to be compliant against that. The govern stage talks you through how to actually put the guardrails in place on your cloud adoption, so that your staff can stay within that compliance needs. Now, governance isn't a blocker. Governance is not something that should be stopping your IT department from implementing the things that they need to do, but it should be guarding them against doing things that you may not want them to do. Like I said, the prime example is storing data out with a region that you're not allowed to because of your industry regulatory compliance. And being able to operate and manage within the cloud is something that is a bit of a cultural change for some organisations. How they deploy workloads, how they optimise, and how they deal with that going forward. Maybe even how they budget that going forward as well. Often it can be the IT department that take on the brunt of the IT implementations, but lots of organisations are looking at how they can cross-charge now when they move to the cloud to other departments. So making, the marketing department pay for their IT resources, making HR pay for their resources, things like that. There's different ways that you can operate because you have much finer control over things like your costs as well. Now, the cloud adoption framework starts to introduce the fact that it isn't just technology we're talking about on our cloud adoption journey. There's also an aspect of people and process that needs to be addressed. Yes, you are changing the technology that your organisation runs, but there are also some things you need to think about, especially around the people and the processes. Like I said, you have to understand the processes of operating the cloud and how you operate your workloads. Even if it's just as simple as knowing who to phone and where to log a fault if something happens, if there's an outage, how do you deal with that, and how do you as an organisation communicate that and follow through the steps of it. You know, maybe gone are the days where your help desk staff walk into the server room and press a button to bring a server back online. You know, with your workloads are hosted within the cloud, you have to think about what is that procedure now, because you can't just walk into the Azure data center and turn on a server or turn it off if there's an issue. So you have to think about these changes in terms of the process as well. And like I said, I'm going to hammer this point home, because the people on your cloud adoption journey are often key to the success. Whether those people that you're talking about are your staff and making sure that they are comfortable with all the changes that are happening within the IT department, or even just your customers, and whether your customers are external customers in terms of, you know, a retail store, or whether your customers are actually your end users, you need to make sure that you're taking them on this journey as well, because it could disrupt some of their working patterns. And if you keep them informed and if you keep them educated about why you're doing this and what you're doing, then your cloud adoption will be much more successful. Now, I spoke earlier on about the fact that the cloud adoption framework is modular, and it isn't necessarily a path that you follow start to end, and you can jump into it depending on where you are on your cloud adoption journey. And what I want to emphasise now is the fact that it's an iterative process. The cloud adoption framework isn't something that you jump into once and never touch again. You can use this time and time again as your business evolves and your cloud maturity grows as well. There are a lot of customers who have implemented Azure in their environment several years ago and are starting to think about how they differently think about their workloads in the cloud. You know, they may have implemented infrastructure as a service, you know, so they have that traditional virtual machines hosted in the cloud, and they're actually thinking about how to be a bit more innovative with their workloads. They have much more experience about using the cloud, and now they're starting to think about how they can transform into a business that no longer uses virtual machines, but uses platform as a service, so PaaS services, or software as a solution, so SaaS services. And they're coming back to the cloud adoption framework, and they're thinking about how they do that and using the cloud adoption framework to actually go forward and evolve their business. So it's something that you can touch on time and time again. And like I said, the cloud adoption framework has some great guidance around some of the simpler things that you need to think about in cloud. So your naming convention, even how you use tags within your resources to help your management and make that much more streamlined. So there's lots of information within the cloud adoption framework that you can reference at any point within your cloud adoption journey. Now, in order to really understand how to get started on this journey and find the right path for your organisation, I would recommend having a look at the assessments. We have several assessments that can help you identify where to start and maybe where to start within the cloud adoption framework itself, depending on your business needs or your business outcomes. The Cloud Journey Tracker helps you identify the cloud adoption path that you can follow based on your needs for your organisation and show you the relevant content within the cloud adoption framework for you. But we also have things like the governance benchmark, which helps identify where your current governance state is and where you want to go and how you can actually go down that path of implementing the governance that you need. Now, I've thrown a lot at you today in this quick 25-30 minute session. What I want to do now is wrap up with some resources and some places where you can find out more information. Now, I'm a big fan of Microsoft Learn. Microsoft Learn is a free platform where you can get hands-on learning around Microsoft Azure, the Cloud Adoption Framework, and other Microsoft products. It has a whole host of information there that has various different learning types. So not only does it have documentation where you can work through it at a self-pace, you can also interact with the technology. So often within some of the Azure modules is the ability to actually use Azure and define it and use it. And then there's also videos as well. So depending on how you like to learn, there should be something in there for everybody. And there's also various different levels of the content as well. So whether you're a beginner in Azure, whether you're an expert in Azure, there's content there for everybody. Now, other resources that you can use, I spoke about the Cloud Adoption Framework, so you can get started with that today with the very first link on my slide here. And please do get your camera out, take a picture, take a screenshot, save some of these links because they are great resources. Within Microsoft Learn, like I said, there's a cloud adoption framework module where you can learn more about the cloud adoption, so you can understand a bit more of what I've touched on today. There's also, I've provided a link on how to build that business case, so the guidance directly into the cloud adoption framework where you can help and try and build out that business case. And the tracker link is also there as well. So like I said, take a picture, take a screenshot. This is a definite resource that you want to bookmark for the future. Thank you so much for your time today. Hopefully it has been useful. Like I said at the very start, I love to connect with new people, so please do reach out to me and keep this conversation going that we've started. Now, I think there's a few minutes left of this session, so what I'm going to do is have a look at some of the questions and see if there's any that I can answer. But thank you so much for your time, and hopefully the session has been useful for you. So one of the questions that I've been asked here is, how do we build the appropriate tagging framework for cost control on the fly? There are lots of guidance within the Cloud Adoption Framework on how to tag your resources and how you can use tags within Azure to manage your cost. Every organisation is going to be slightly different. Some organisations use cost centres or cost codes to potentially help them with their costs. So they mark their resources in Azure with that cost code that they have internally. And then when they look at their budget report or their cost, the Azure cost management blade at the end of the month, they can see how much every cost centre has actually used, and then they can use that to cross-charge across organisations. So there's various different things that you can actually do with the tagging. Definitely check out the Cloud Adoption Framework for some of the guidance, start to get you thinking about some of the things that you can think about and the possibilities of using tags. Like I said, every journey is going to be unique when you actually do that. So I've got a question here as well. How big a team do we need to assure compliance in Azure for administration security in our cloud adoption? We have over 1,000 IT professionals who currently are mostly working on on-prem workloads. I'm not sure we actually define how big a team you need. I don't think I've ever seen any figures around that, and I think that's going to be unique to every organisation about how they actually use the cloud and how many people are looking after it. I guess it's as many as you need in order to meet your timelines, your success measures, and your budgetary requirements. Obviously, you when you're on your cloud adoption journey, there is a bit of the project work that needs to be undertaken, and also your business as usual work as well. So it's maybe a 50-50 split on people working on business as usual activity and people working on project work. What I would say though is to be mindful of that. If you split your team into two, where some are working on the cloud and some are working on your current environments, make sure that the people that are working on your current environments aren't left behind in terms of the skilling gap. Otherwise, you're gonna really have an issue with your staff where some of them are more advanced in the technology and some are being left behind or feel like they're being left behind. But again, the Cloud Adoption Framework talks around how you can restructure your team, how you can even maybe change some of the job titles to reflect this new cloud adoption journey that you're on. So I'm going to say it again, the Cloud Adoption Framework has a mass of great information about how you can actually think about some of these challenges and deal with them going forward as well. So one of the questions here I've got is, how do you convince the business we should move things to Azure? And I think that is one of the big questions that everybody talks about. Everybody's motivations are going to be very different. If I look back at the retail example that I gave at the very start, if you have a retail store and you are constantly hitting issues where you can't service the end users, you could probably build easily and quickly build a business case to prove that the cloud can actually overcome that challenge, overcome that negativity. I think you have to find and identify potentially an issue within your organisation that the cloud can fix and start with that. Maybe start small and then build up to that cloud adoption journey. But yeah, again, The Cloud Adoption Framework has some great information around how you can build that business case and how you can have those conversations with your finance directors, your CEOs, and try and convince them that Azure is something that you should be investing in and implementing within your environment. Now, I think we're almost at time, everybody. So thank you again for all your questions. Thank you again for your patience. And it's been great talking to you today. And hopefully we'll catch you all at another Ignite in the future.